So we looked at some different religions, and then kind of what happened is this happens very often in the world, is when something gets too powerful, they start to try to live by different rules. We see that power often corrupts. And so someone needs you see that over and over again, is when someone becomes too powerful, they feel like the rules don't apply to them. So, so as you could see, the church was running prostitution for a while, and then what happened is the church got so corrupt that it had to go through the Protestant Reformation. And the reason why I'm putting this here is because we're going to find out the people that settled the United States is the Puritans. And the Puritans were influenced heavily by this Protestant Reformation, and the Protestant Reformation, it changed the way that we looked at sexuality. So in the last modules, I was trying to show you why Christianity, what some factors that influenced Christianity's rise is the Roman Empire got so huge and was so powerful, and there was a lot of sexual excess, because when we get bored, when we feel very comfortable, like we turn to kind of not bizarre, but different forms of dopamine. You know, sometimes we get into drug addiction, we buy things we don't need, we eat food that doesn't really nourish us, and probably use sex to excess. And then when the Roman Empire fell, because we got so big, or because they got so big, is the whole world, you know, there was chaos everywhere. So then that allowed a new religion to come up, and this religion was backlashing against the excess that was practiced by the Romans. So, you know, it was very controlled, and sex had led to our downfall. And so they taught that, you know, sex, the only acceptable sex was to procreate. However, then the church rose to power. You know, Christianity, the Catholic Church rose to power, rose to power, rose to power. And then, as you know, there's different forms of Christianity, like Catholicism, Protestantism, Methodist, so on and so forth. So people saw the problems with the church, and there were two main leaders of like a change. And they kind of reinterpreted how the religion should be expressed. It's called the Protestant Reformation. And the two guys were Luther and Calvin. And the reason why I'm bringing this in is because of the way they approach sex. So they kind of changed it, and they reinterpreted things, and they said, no, sex is beautiful. Sex is something that you should enjoy with your partner, but it should be within the confines of marriage. So still, premarital sex was not extramarital sex is not okay, but As far as not enjoying your wife, no, that's not what we're saying. And another thing is during the Protestant Reformation, the age gap was kind of big earlier in Christianity, and then it kind of closed in, and it was more like your wife is your partner, your wife is your friend. So here I'm talking about the Protestant Reformation, and then I'm also, I wanted to talk about who settled America. So our founders were the Puritans, and the Puritans came over for religious freedom, so they wanted to get away from England, and they wanted to have their own religious freedom. They didn't want to be under kind of the rules of the governing church at that point. And so when they came over, I thought it would be interesting for you to know, all of you were probably taught about the Mayflower. It was this boat that supposedly the first Puritans came over, and then they landed on Pride Rock, which is in Massachusetts. But here's something that they don't teach you, is there were 18 couples originally on that boat, but only 9 of the wives survived. So even though the Puritans, with their very pure morals, came over here to settle America, half of the men were left with no partner. So if there's no partner for these men, then you can imagine they were either having extramarital affairs, probably a lot of masturbation, which at the time was kind of considered sinful, or maybe they were taking on the natives, perhaps raping them, something like that. So even though the Puritans came over here with really good intentions, and that's what our country has been founded on, fate did not allow them to follow through with that very well. So another thing is I believe that American sexuality morals, the foundation, is somewhat, we're seen by other countries as being prudish. So I started the module with that person that was from a different country, talking about how they looked at sex, and then when they came over here to America, they felt like they were a terrible person, they felt like something was wrong with them, it was not okay. I'm not sure if you remember, but Bill Clinton had a big kind of sex scandal, and I remember reading the news reports that other countries were appalled that we would get into an American president's sex life. That, you know, that's just what they do, and you don't look at that kind of. So just interesting to remember that our background was the Puritans, and they had very strong thoughts on how you should have sex, and it was very kind of what you would say kind of prudish. Okay, so here's another guy that I wanted to introduce you to, because probably maybe a lot of you have heard of him and you don't know the story of him. So I have a video that shows you the story of the Marquis de Sade, but this is the man that we got sadism from. And the Marquis de Sade, he was a colorful character. He was actually a philosopher. And his philosophy was, and I want to share this with you because that's what I'm trying to do here with this lecture, is I'm trying to get you to see different ways that people have approached sex and broaden some horizons maybe, or maybe not broaden, but just like give different lenses to look at this behavior. So the Marquis de Sade, he believed in this philosophy that that which is natural cannot be evil. And, you know, he talks about how animals kill one another and animals rape one another, and there's a lot of violence, and, you know, that's just natural. So considering yourself to be unnatural, you know, he says over and over again, why is it that the evil prosper? And I don't know, that would be an interesting discussion concept for me too. I'm not sure that we're going to have a discussion, but the concept of, do you think that people who, you know, step on others, who take advantage of others, do they get ahead? And that's what he's saying. He's like, the ones that take and take and take, they get more and more and more. That which is natural is cannot be evil. So you're going to find out from the video that supposedly he started writing these crazy stories to get back at his mother-in-law. So his mother-in-law didn't like him. He was wealthy, but he wasn't super wealthy, and so he married into wealthy. And you know, he was a bit of a party boy and loved to have great parties and things. And then he would started writing, and he wrote these. You know, when you think of 50 Shades of Grey, look at that. That book sold more copies than any other book. And to be honest, that book is nothing compared to what he was writing. So people were titillated by that. And back in his time, he would write stuff. I mean, I think if I was back in his time and there was no TV and there was no this and somebody was publishing what he was writing, I mean, I would read it too, but his stuff is really, really, I want you to take 50 Shades of Grey and I want you to magnify it by 10 times at least. The mother and daughter were locked in the dungeon, and they were forced to have sex with one another, and they were forced to shit on one another, and the candle was stuck in the mother's anus, and it had to be lit, and then you know, as the daughter writhed in pain, and then the daughter had to watch the mother starve to death, and then they had sex on her corpse. And you know, it's really, really pretty extreme stuff that he was writing. But I guess if you don't have anything else that you're looking at, or you know, probably a lot of us would be interested, like, wow, what was he writing? And if you are interested, you can buy his books online. You can at Barnes and Nobles. A lot of times when you can find a Barnes and Nobles, they do stock those in the philosophy section. So here's some pictures. Now, what's interesting is that we're going to find out the neuroscience of the brain is that when women are having orgasm, their pain centers are actually, it's tied in with their pain centers. And so maybe the reason why women are drawn to the pain, or you know, some women will say, I like you to pull my hair, I like you to choke me. Maybe that's because of the brain function in there with that. So we got the term sadism from Marquis de Sade, but masochism we got from another writer that was, it wasn't a contemporary of his. I'm not quite sure. I mean, these two terms were coined in the Victorian age, which was like the early 1900s, but I'm talking really, really early. I would say actually probably these terms were coined like right at 1900. And we got the masochism term from Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. And the guy that gave us these terms was this guy named von Krafft-Ebing. He's thought of as the first sexual researcher ever. And there was another writer that wrote about women, very tall, thin women in fur coats, and that they would humiliate men and torture men, but in a very ladylike way. It wasn't kind of this what you're seeing on the screen there with the Marquis de Sade. But what I'm getting at is, the reason I'm bringing this up is masochism is one of the few paraphilias that is common in women. Now, it's not more common in women than men, but most women do not have paraphilias. Paraphilias, which are sexual deviances, like an abnormal sexual approach that is causing them problems in their lives, or hurting others, or they're upset by. That's what a paraphilia is. It has to be kind of defined by their behavior. Most of them are rare in women. It's rare to find them in women. But the one that you do find with a little bit of regularity is actually masochism. So I'm bringing in, like, again, why might women be more attracted to pain and the way their brain functions? Well, I feel like I've talked a lot on this one, so I'm going to end here.